Hello, Calgary! My name is Fiona Michelli, and I'm an instructional designer with Corporate Project and Asset Management. You're listening to a recorded adaptation of a workshop that Dorothy Laskowska and I presented in January 2016. Part of Dorothy's role as a corporate web communications advisor is to manage the city's use of the web policy as it relates to accessibility in particular. As for me, I'm just a gal who took on this topic as a professional challenge and a personal interest, and I wanted to share what I've learned with you. The City of Calgary, like most Canadian government bodies, bases their web content accessibility guidelines on the WCAG 2.0 standards. All city-produced web content, external or internal, including e-learning courses, must meet WCAG 2.0 Level AA standards. This session is about how to create or test online courses to ensure that people with disabilities can perceive and interact with those courses. It will be the most useful for those who are designing and developing courses in Articulate Storyline, Update 5 or higher, but many of the same principles will apply to users of other tools such as Adobe Captivate. When we discuss accessibility, what we'll be considering are several types of disabilities, including visual impairments such as blindness, reduced vision, color blindness, hearing impairments, including complete deafness and limited hearing, motor impairments, specifically the inability or difficulty of using a mouse, and even cognitive and neurological impairments such as learning disabilities and photosensitivity are covered by WCAG. Accessible e-learning design is important because it demonstrates social responsibility and it's part of our commitment to an inclusive workplace. It's also a legal obligation for public services to be equally available to all. It's a basic human right. Finally, it's a professional skill set that's required to meet the city's policies. So basically, it's part of your job. As a sighted e-learning designer, it was difficult for me to imagine how a blind user would even interact with a computer. The answer is that users with sight impairments can often use screen reader software, such as JAWS. Screen reader software uses a computer-generated voice to read the text that's on the computer. A blind user, especially one that is both deaf and blind, can also use something called a refreshable braille display. And these devices work by raising pins in the correct braille configuration when a user moves to a new line of text on the computer. It's important to keep in mind that many visually impaired users are not fully blind. These users aren't likely to have a screen reader or a braille display. Instead, they might use a screen magnifier or rely on large font sizes and good color contrast to have a good learning experience. Or they might increase the magnification of their browser in order to be able to see better. When you're designing accessible e-learning, another really important thing to realize is that a blind computer user is not likely to be using a mouse. Instead, they'll use a keyboard or another kind of device to interact with on-screen elements, such as buttons, and to activate text so that it can be read by the screen reader or braille display. Keep the interrelatedness of vision impairments and keyboard reliance in mind when you're designing accessible e-learning, because if you design your course with a vision-limited keyboard user in mind, you won't have to incorporate too much else in order to make the course fully accessible. It takes care of most of it. Apart from not being able to see the screen well enough to use a mouse, there are other reasons to use a keyboard instead of a mouse to interact with the computer. Quadriplegics and others with severe motor limitations might use a mouse stick to press keys on a keyboard and might interact with the computer that way. But even those with common motor impairments, such as arthritis and carpal tunnel, may find a mouse more difficult to use than a keyboard, so they might choose to use a keyboard. It's probably easier to imagine how a deaf or a hard of hearing individual that has no sight difficulties would interact with your e-learning course. If a deaf person is provided with captions that they can read in place of the audio, they can basically interact with the computer in much the same way as anybody else. Consider, though, that somebody who was born deaf probably had a harder time learning to read, since they had no concept of the sounds that made up words. And so in response to that, leave captions on screen for enough time and ensure that your users have the ability to go back and reread. And that'll also help people who are just slower at reading, speak a second language, or have learning disabilities. So we've talked now about the main accessibility needs that we'll be addressing with our course designs. There are a couple of important things to realize as an e-learning designer. The first is that users with some variation of special need are pretty common, especially in our aging workforce. It's tempting to think that accessibility doesn't matter for your courses because there's no one on your team that's visibly or severely disabled. However, there likely are, or can easily be, those with some impairments who will benefit from your design accommodations. The second thing to remember is that there are infinite combinations of special needs, and so there are many technologies that a person might be using or not using in order to interact with your course. A keyboard user will not always have sight limitations, so therefore they won't always have access to a screen reader or be familiar with the complicated keystrokes required to navigate without a mouse. Users with limited but not absent sight might not have a screen reader that you can count on to read the course to them. However, you can't anticipate every situation, but I've found that getting yourself into the mindset of a blind keyboard user when designing or evaluating courses takes care of most of those accommodations, and it allows you to make more common sense design decisions rather than having to memorize all the rules required for accessibility compliance. Standards do exist, though, to guide developers towards making products, web pages, and other online content accessible to more users. The most commonly used standards are WCAG 2.0, which stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. This is an international standard, and it's what most organizations follow in Canada. You might have also heard of the American standards, which are called Section 508. So just mentioning that, I guess. The City of Calgary's accessibility policy requires that all online content for internal or external users be WCAG 2.0 compliant to a AA level. What that means is that AA level is stricter than complying to level A, but it's less strict than complying to AAA. So it's a good idea to be familiar with WCAG, and you can just find those online. Now, Articulate Storyline software has claimed to be compliant with Section 508 for quite some time, and it has only recently, as of Storyline 2 Update 5, claimed to be compliant with the stricter WCAG 2.0. Compliance for an e-learning authoring tool like Storyline means that authors can use their software to create online content that is compliant with these standards. Storyline does not create a compliant course automatically, nor does it make it especially easy to do. The only claim that Storyline or its competitors, such as Captivate, make is that it should be technically possible to create and publish a course that is accessible to the standards described in WCAG 2.0. You still need to know how to do it. The idea of accessibility might seem scary to those who are beginning to design online courses as a new thing. It may also seem excessively time-consuming and feature-limiting. Accessibility is an extra thing to think about, but it's not inherently more difficult than creating an inaccessible course, so rest assured that that'll be okay. Advanced tools and techniques are not required. It is probably more time-consuming as well to design and test this way, especially until the authoring tools get better and make it easier for course creators to do. But in most cases, accessible design is more of a mindset than a set of steps. So once you've learned to think accessibly, the time to create accessible courses won't really be much more than to create an inaccessible course. As for feature limiting, well, some features that look kind of flashy, like drag and drop interactions, won't be available to you if you're creating a universally accessible course. But it is definitely possible, and up to the skill of the designer, to create a visually attractive, mentally engaging, high-value online course that is also accessible. Chances are you're learning about accessibility because either or both of the following things are true. You believe that accessible courses are the right thing to build, and or you're required to comply with a standard. You might be responsible for design or development of online courses, or you may be more responsible for verifying that a course meets accessibility standards. Now that you know a bit more about the context of accessible e-learning design, let's dig into how to do it. I did also create a guide that you should have that has all the details that you can refer to. And so I'm just going to be showing some of the main points that are in that guide and to give you a little more context about what the screen reader sounds like. So this is a screen recording of a title page that I created in Articulate Storyline. It's just our basic City of Calgary template and looks pretty good. There's nothing wrong with how it looks. Let's see how the screen reader reads a page like this if it has been created in using default methods. So I've got JAWS screen reader loaded up, but before we let it read the page, what do you as a sighted user tend to read first on a screen like this? So some people in the workshop said that they read the City of Calgary logo because it was eye-catching and it was in the top left corner. Most people, though, said that they read the title first, Accessible E-Learning Design, because it's kind of prominent and it is in the center of the screen in large font. Let's see how JAWS responds to that. I'm just going to restart this. Reload it.
Accessibility _W.
Okay, so.
Tab, new tab page, picture 1 graphic.
So you'll notice a yellow rectangle around the area that I'm activating different areas on the screen using the tab key, which is how a person with limited vision or other reasons for not using the mouse would be interacting with a course like this. So the first thing that it read was actually graphic 1 or something like that. It's picking up the background image, and I haven't assigned any kind of text to that image to explain what it is or what have you, but that's the first thing it picks up.
Tab. Tab, picture 2 graphic.
Okay, so picture 2 graphic is the next thing it picks up.
Tab, is :protected.
Yes, :protected.
Tab, rectangle 1.
It's picking up even the rectangle.
Tab, accessible e-learning design.
Okay, and now we get to title. So you can see that by default, it's starting off in the top left corner and reading what it is picking up, which is a graphic that is unnamed. Then it's reading another graphic that's unnamed in the top left corner and moving on down, reading everything that's on the screen, top left corner to bottom right corner, which isn't how we'd want for somebody to be reading this page, right? So let's go back into Storyline and we'll see what we can do to change that and make it more accessible. So now I'm in Articulate Storyline software where I've built this page. And you'll be able to see how we can fix this. I won't go through every topic in this much detail. It's all in your guide and it's easier probably to refer to it from there. I just wanted to make some, because the idea of tab order and reading order is pretty critical for the topic. So I just wanted to show you this idea in more detail. So to change how the screen reader will read the screen is the same as changing the order with which the keyboard user can tab through the screen. So we'll use the tab order button, and that's a really critical idea. I'm just going to move this over here a little bit so we can kind of see what's happening. So the default tab order puts picture 1, which is the background, and that is in focus first. In focus means the part of the screen that is being used at the time by the screen reader software or by the keyboard. So if it was a button, you'd be able to interact with that button when the button itself was in focus, and it's highlighted by a yellow square. So right now it's the picture 1 that's in focus first. Then you're going to be able to press tab and go to the City of Calgary logo, and then you're going to go way over here to ISC protected, and then you're going to go to the rectangle, and then you're going to go to the text where it'll read what's inside the text box. That's the default order, but what we were going to do is change the create a custom tab order. Okay, so this is a good example because it gives you a little bit of a sense that there's some thinking that has to go into this on the designer's part. So what do we want for the screen reader to pick up first? Maybe it's the title, even though it's way down here at the bottom of the screen, right? So if we decided that that was what we wanted it to pick up first, then I'll find that element and I'll move it. I'll move it up in the tab sequence so it goes to the top. Okay. Now, what are some other things that are on the screen? The picture, the background image, we could describe the background image so that the screen reader will read graphic of train moving really fast through beautiful City of Calgary. And if I wanted it to say something when the picture came in focus, I could write that into the alternate text box here. Now, I don't think that it's a good idea or necessary to the learning for somebody to be able to perceive that graphic. It's really just a decoration, right? So one of the big principles of WCAG is that you remove everything from the screen reader that's not critical to the learning experience, that doesn't need to be perceived in order to enhance the learning experience, so that there's not a bunch of nonsense kind of getting in the way. So I'm just going to remove this completely from the tab order by pushing the delete button. You'll notice that it doesn't delete the actual picture. It's still there. What it does is it just deletes it from the tab sequence so that the screen reader will not be able to tab to it and will not read anything when it gets to it. Picture 2 is the City of Calgary logo. So what do you think we should do about that? It depends on your perspective, right? So if you would like for a blind user to know that this is a City of Calgary logo, City of Calgary course, then we can type something into the alternate text field and we can decide whether it'll be read first or second. It's kind of a judgment call. Some people will probably decide to leave that off. It's not critical to the learning. Some people will say, yeah, it's our brand. We got to have people know that this is a City of Calgary course. So, so what we'll type into the alternate text box will not be City of Calgary logo. What we want to actually say here, or what the visual speaks to, is the idea that this is a City of Calgary course. So that's what I'm going to type into the alternate text box. Okay. Now the next one here is ISC protected, which is Internet Security Code, I think, protected. We might, again, you know, this is a bit of a judgment call. Do you need for that to be read or not? Let's say we did, but we wanted it to sound more like ISC instead of ISC. So to do that, if you have an acronym, which is not generally advisable anyway, what you can do is you can put spaces in between the letters and it'll read it ISC instead of trying to sound it out. So ISC protected is what we want to say in that text box. If you put alt text for a text box, it will read it in place of the text box itself. Okay, and now rectangle 1 is the background color for this title. Now, we don't need that, right? You don't need to be able to tab to it because there's nothing that's going to happen when you click on it. and it just sort of interferes with the sequence of things. So it's only useful for a sighted user, it's only decorative. We will remove it completely. Okay, now removing it from the tab order is equivalent to unchecking a box which is available in a different window that says remove from visibility to accessibility tools. I'll show you that just quickly. Okay, so the other place to get to a window like that, where you can turn elements on and off from the accessibility tools, is in the format window, actually. So if I go into format, if I click on a shape that can be formatted, or a picture or anything, and I go to size, the size and position window comes up, and if I go into it further, it's not like a logical place to me, size and position, but anyway, alt text is in here, and you can see that it's been unchecked. Object is no longer visible to accessibility tools, and that's because it's been removed from the tabbing sequence, which also makes it invisible. You won't be able to tab there or make it be in focus. It also gives you an option to add alternate text if you want it to be visible, but we don't in this case, so we'll push close, and then we'll publish it again and see what it sounds like now. Publish. Okay. I'll start JAWS up again. Just give JAWS a minute to load.
JAWS Professional Activation Dialog. Accessibility _WK. Tab.
So now this is in focus. Oh, sorry, I need to start this.
Accessibility _WKSHP. Tab. A City of Calgary course graphic. Tab. A City of Calgary. Tab. ISC. Tab. Skip navigation. Hit enter to return to this.
Okay.
Accessibility _WKSHP_ tab. Accessible e-learning design.
There we go. Sorry. When I'm trying to record it, it's got a lot of different things going on at the same time, so it doesn't always read it the way it should be. But the first thing I can tab to, which is in focus here, indicated by the yellow highlight, accessible e-learning design, and it was red. Okay.
Tab. A City of Calgary course graphic.
So that read the alt text that I entered, a City of Calgary course graphic. Graphic is added. I didn't type graphic. It adds, the screen reader knows it's a graphic and adds it.
Tab. ISC protected.
So that sounded better this time because it's spaced out, ISC. Okay.
Tab. Skip navigation. Hit enter to return to the slide button.
And that's it for that slide. So I can't tab to the rectangle anymore. I could have also removed the City of Calgary logo if I had wanted to. I can't tab or hear anything about the background graphic. It's just been removed. There's no focus around any of those objects anymore. That's probably the most critical thing, if you remember nothing else from this session, is that the tab sequence, what you can see, if it's highlighted, and you can see the highlight because when you preview or publish the course, either of those two options, it will show you a highlight. You'll be able to press tab and go through your course. If it's highlighted in yellow like that, then it will be read by the screen reader, or at least you can assume it will be read by the screen reader. Anything, and in that same sequence as it is highlighted. So remember that, that's pretty key. It gives you a way to test your courses without having a screen reader to listen to. So there are a few things more that I wanted to show you how the screen reader responds, and then the rest you can pretty much figure out from your guide. It's pretty thorough, I think, so please do use that, and I just wanted to show you a few things about how the screen reader works. So
tab, new tab page, back button. So
here is an example of how a user would interact with different elements. I've made the back button visible to accessibility tools because I want people to be able to click on them. When the focus landed on the button, it said back button. I didn't type the word button anywhere. I don't have to. JAWS adds button to let me know that it's something that I can activate, or I would be able to click on it with my mouse, or I can press the space bar since I'm using the keyboard. Now, if I push space bar now, it's not going to do anything because actually this is the first slide in my in the file, so there is no back, but normally it would go back.
Tab. Go to our My City page for more information. Button.
That's recognizing it as a button, but let's see what happens if I push this. Nothing. And if I push tab again...
Tab. Go to our My City page for more information. Button.
If I push tab in there, it didn't go to the hyperlink the way that we might expect, or we might expect for us to be able to access the hyperlinks within a course, right, using the keyboard. This is somewhere that Storyline falls a bit short. The default hyperlink feature does not actually allow, it's not keyboard accessible. I can't tab to that link to activate it at all. So what you have to do instead is you have to put an invisible button over top of the hyperlink to give something for the keyboard user to tab to. So in this last example here, this is the text box, which the screen reader just read.
Tab. Open the My City website button.
And now I've added an invisible button over top of that in order to be able to activate something. And that's what allows the user to activate that web page. So I had to do that separately, and it's something that's described in the guide and that you'll be able to follow there.
Tab. Skip navigation. Hit enter to return to the slide. Button.
Okay, I want to point out about this skip navigation. It is a WCAG criteria that you have to provide the ability for the user, the keyboard user, to skip the main navigation elements. So that's what Storyline is doing there, and the software does it for me. I don't have to do anything special to the menu in order to have it give it the ability to skip. If I push enter now,
enter,
which is what it told me to do,
tab, back button,
it brings me right back to the screen instead of going to the previous, next, menu, all the other player buttons. If I don't press enter
tab,
at that
go
point,
go tab, open the My tab, skip navigation, hit enter to return to the slide, button.
Okay, so if I just push tab again,
tab, previous button.
That's how I'm able to activate the buttons that are on the player. So what that
tab, next button.
What that means for you as a designer is you should really try to limit any kind of navigational elements that are repetitive on every page, called like persistent navigation. It shouldn't be on the slide itself. It should be on the player. And the reason for that is that I have the option right there to skip those player elements. And if I'm not given that option because the element is on the slide, then I will have to listen to it every time on every slide, right? So if I had a home button or a resources button or something like that on the slide itself, it would need to be able to be tabbed to in order to be activated by the keyboard, and that means that it will be also read every time. So in order to meet the WCAG criteria, you should use the player menu instead.
Tab, menu tab. To activate tab page, press space bar.
So I can go into the menu by pressing the
tab, untitled button. Slide 1 of 9. To tab, resources link.
This is a good place in the player settings to add different buttons to your course, things that you want to be persistent, like a main menu button or a contact us button, that sort of thing, in the player where it can be skipped.
Tab, volume left right slider 80%. To increase or decrease, use the arrow keys.
Okay, so that's where I can adjust my volume.
Tab, back tab, go tab, open tab, skip navigation, hit a tab, pre-tab, next button.
Okay, so what you heard there was that once it's done with the whole menu, it'll go back to the screen and see if you want to do anything more, and then it'll give you the previous next button again. So I'll press spacebar to continue. I added this screen to show you what happens if I have a rollover, or sometimes people call that like a hover trigger or mouse over.
Tab, mouse dash over the picture of Nicole to find out what she's thinking.
So first of all, if you want somebody to be able to interact with this, you're going to need to tell them in some way some kind of instructions, right?
Tab, Nicole, neutral expression, hand on chin, looking off, thinking graphic.
That's the default text that comes if you insert a character in Storyline. It has its own description of the pose. It's not something that I added in alt text. So I'm moused over, it's in focus, right? If I actually use the mouse, something will come up that I can read as a sighted user, but there's no way for me to see that with the keyboard.
Tab, skip navigation, tab,
so it just
button.
Goes right to the player. There's nothing for me to be able to do there.
Tab, next button.
And here's a different version of that. It's basically the same kind of thing.
Click on the picture of Nicole to find out what she's thinking.
Except that what I've done...
Nicole, neutral expression, hand on chin, looking off, thinking button.
Yeah. So I've told people to click on this picture, and it's been indicated by the screen reader this is a button. So now when I press the space bar, it activates.
Tab, I wonder if it will rain today.
And I'm able to tab to a place where I can read that text. So that's a better way to do a rollover type effect.
Tab, skip nav, tab, next.
Okay. Now here are lists. Lists are kind of key. It's actually supposed to be that you indicate somehow that there is a list that we're listening to. So
tab, bring the following items on your trip: shoes, comfortable, dressy, computer, notebook, and pen.
Okay. So if you had listened to that with your eyes closed, you would sort of not be able to tell that there was a sub list there, right? So bring the following items on your trip: shoes, comfortable, dressy, computer, notebook, and pen. There's no indication that there's a sub list here, and there is no way in Storyline to indicate things like lists or sub lists. There is no indication that this is a list at all, except that we've written following items : right?
Tab, skip nav, tab, next.
This is an example now where we've used the numbered list feature in Storyline to define the list. See what that sounds like.
Tab, bring the following items on your trip: shoes, comfortable, dressy, computer, notebook, and pen.
It reads it exactly the same as it did the bulleted list. There is no indication of numbering. There is no indication of sublist there either. So these are the default settings.
Tab, next.
So a better way to do it might be this way, where I've actually entered in numbers and letters in order to separate out the list, and we'll see what that sounds like.
Bring the following items on your trip: 1. Shoes, a right pair and comfortable, B, right pair and dressy, 2. Computer, 3. Notebook and pen. Okay, so it wasn't as bad because we got the numbers at least. So I've actually typed in 1 dot shoes, right? In this case, though, I used a letter symbology for indicating a sublist, and it's not a great method because it read it as a right parent, which is saying like a and then right parentheses, and it doesn't really even do the B. It sort of went b right parent. Let's see if we can listen to that again. Tab, skip, alert, enter, alert, exchange needs, tab, leaving menus, bring the following items on your trip: 1. Shoes, a right pair and comfortable, B, right pair and dressy, 2. Computer, 3. Notebook and pen. So you kind of see how that sounds. So a better way to do it is with, if you're going to have a sub list, is to number the whole thing. Tab, next. Tab, bring the following items on your trip: 1. Shoes, 1.1, comfortable, 1.2, dressy, 2. Computer, 3. Notebook and pen. So it's not the best, but it's bad. It is probably the best we can do if we require a sublist. The next slide has an example of audio that autoplays. Tab, skip navigation, tab, previous, but tab.
Everybody loves cheese and toast, and nothing goes better on a cold winter's day than a grilled cheese sandwich, dripping with cheese and carbs and fats. Delicious, nutritious, and so easy to make. Here's how you make a great grilled cheese sandwich. In an accessible course, you'd want to have a transcript or closed captions for the audio, which I don't have sampled here. But the idea with that is that the auto-playing audio doesn't really conflict with the screen reader because it won't read that until I tab.
Tab, cheese goes great with toast.
So the on-screen text isn't read until I tab to it.
Tab. Here's how you make a grilled cheese sandwich, heat up a frying pan.
Okay,
Tab, tab. Next
get
button.
the idea there. This is an example of a multiple choice question. I'll just show you really quickly.
Tab. Why do birds suddenly appear every time you are near? Tab. They like your sweater. Checkbox not checked.
Okay, so I should have indicated...
They like your sweater. Checkbox not checked.
What's it doing now?
Tab. I'm in love. Checkbox not checked.
Yeah, sorry. I should have indicated that this was a multiple answer question somewhere in the text because it's not clear from the screen reader, right? So we should make sure that we indicate that things are questions and how we want them answered. It does automatically put in the text about the radio button checked or not checked.
Space checked.
If I were to check it, it will tell me that it's checked.
Tab. Birds are strange.
Yeah.
Checkbox not checked.
Reads me the option and tells me whether or not it's changed. If I wanted to go back, I could go Shift Tab.
I'm in love. Checkbox checked.
So it's telling me that it is checked in that case.
Shift Tab. They like your sweater. Checkbox not checked.
Right. So I could answer a few of these and then go to Submit.
Tab. Submit button.
Okay. This is
Tab. Menu tab to activate.
a problem
tab,
because
tab,
it goes all the way around.
Link. Tab. Volume tab. Skip navigation. Hit enter to it. Tab. Submit button. Tab. Menu tab to activate. Tab. Tab. Wide tab. Resource tab. Volume tab. Rectangle 3.
Okay, so I have submitted that as a bug to Storyline. It really should, if you were a blind user, you wouldn't even know that your answer was incorrect until much, much later after it had gone through the player twice. So I have submitted that as a bug. They said they will escalate it. We'll see. But another thing I wanted to point out here is that the default feedback, which is controllable using the feedback master, and it explains that in the guide as well, it's not really set up properly for accessibility either because it reads the rectangle.
Space.
Oops, sorry.
Tab. Incorrect.
Now it tells me it's incorrect, right?
Tab. Line 5.
It also reads the line. So you should go back into the feedback master before you create a bunch of questions and just remove the line and the rectangle from the accessibility or from the tab order.
Tab. Continue button.
And then I could continue by pressing continue. I think that's probably all that I'm going to show you right now. Thanks for listening to this video. I hope that you learned something good. Remember, I guess, that the screen reader reads what is in focus on the screen when you are previewing or using a published course, and that is a great way to test it. Let's go continue. Oh, actually, I did want to show you one more thing, which is about the zooming.
Menu, print submenu, Z. Safety submenu, S, Z. Add site to start menu. Leaving menus, continue button.
You don't need JAWS for this, but so I just increased the size, the magnification of my course. This will help somebody who is not blind but is visually impaired able to see the course larger, right? I would be able to even increase the size of the window in order to not have these scroll bars appear when it is a bigger size, but I'd have to change the default settings in Storyline. By default, the player will not be able to resize.
Safety submenu, S, Z. Leaving menus, rectangle 3.
Yeah, okay, JAWS. By default, it won't be able to resize in Storyline. So there are instructions in your guide about how to set it up so that you are able to meet those criteria about the user being able to change the magnification of the screen up to 200%, which is WCAG criterion.